Hello everybody, this is Danny.
I'm Wanda.
From Deep South Homestead. On our series, Our Path to Financial Freedom, as we talk about our journey through life and some of the lessons we've learned in life that helps us to be financially independent like we are. We have talked about our early childhood years in our first video. Our second video, we talked about our teenage years up to 12 years. Preteen years, I guess you would say.
Yeah. Today
we're going to pick up probably around the age, maybe 14, 15 on forward to, and I don't know, maybe to 18 if we have time in this video to get to that point.
But it might be
broken up again, even again, because your teenage years are some very influential years in your life that helps to mold you into your adult or young adult life and your adult life, and then later in life, it really, whether we believe it or not, it affects the decisions that we make later in life and where we end up in life. So as we start this off, I'm sitting here thinking about the last series we talked about, where we were living at and some different things that was going on there. At 14 years old, my dad looked out in the yard one day. I distinctly remember him telling us this at supper table. He said, I looked at my wife and I said, Dora, there's 17 kids in our yard playing. It's time to go. Because you got to realize when we first moved there, we were the only people there. My daddy actually built the road into the property back in there. So we were by ourselves. But by the time I had turned 14 years old, we was like a subdivision. I mean, everybody owned, when I say subdivision, back then a subdivision was like everybody owned 3-acre blocks. And so everybody in our neighborhood owned 3-acre blocks. And Dad looked out there and he said, Dora, there's 17 kids in this yard. It's time for us to get out of here. He said, we'll never control these kids with that many kids around them all the time. And that's what he did. My dad, in turn, moved. We was on the west side of town. My dad went all the way on the east side of town and found a house and 6 acres of land for $6,000. Now, the old house needed some work.
A lot of work.
It needed a lot of work, yeah, I guess. But you got to realize when you walk out the back door, it was only like about a 10-foot strip, and there was no fence there. And it was real thick and wooded, and people back then just threw the garbage over the fence. They burned it, and then they just dumped the glass and the cans and everything over the fence. And behind that fence there was it was woods, it was thick, and broken glass and cans. And
all the old home places were like that.
They were all like that.
Because we didn't have it like that, but I do know cleaning up places.
Yeah.
Every old home place, they burnt everything they could burn.
Yeah.
What was left over was just piled in one spot.
Just put a big pile up back. Yeah. And when we got there, my dad went ahead and he hired a guy with a bulldozer to come in, and he kind of cleared some land around the house there and kind of got it opened up, but there was always glass and stuff, and we went in, and as kids, we had to pick through every day. Dad would put us out there after the rain, and we'd pick up as much glass as we could and put it in containers to haul off to the dump. And we finally got it cleaned up where we could get around, but you still just was a little leery about going barefooted. So Dad brought a big dozer in and pushed the whole 6 acres off and cleared the whole thing. And cut every tree off of it except for a few right there around the house. Then we have this. Dad thought the land was level, but it ended up being a big steep holler in it. And he was really upset about that. But he had everything pushed down into the hollow and buried in the bottom of this hollow. And that was a good lesson to me at that time, which we're going to talk about this probably way in the future. But the lesson was when you go to buy land, you better get out and walk every square inch of it, even if you had to take a machete and cut a path through it. Because my dad, all he did was drove down the road, because the blacktop bordered it on 2 sides, and he drove down the road on 2 sides and looked at it. Well, it looked level because of all the woods and bushes and trees in there. He never got out and actually walked it. So that was a lesson to me for older life. Whenever you buy a piece of property, get out and walk it before you make a purchase on it.
Yeah, and we were, like I said, from the time I was 2 or 3 in a block house on 1 acre of land, and we always had a garden. And when I turned between 13 and 14, my dad decided to move. But instead of moving out like Danny's dad, we moved into a subdivision, 1 lot, not even an acre. But we ended up on the end of a road, and there was only 10 or 12 houses in the whole subdivision, and behind us was a whole field. And so we were on the end, and my dad thought, okay, this is nice. We're kind of in town, but yet we still have the country behind us. There was still a field. And within 3 years, the subdivision had built up to 40 or 50 houses, and the whole field behind us sold. And they were going to extend our road past our house and make another subdivision behind us. So at that point, I was probably close to 16. We moved back out into the country on a 3-acre lot and with a pond in the middle. That was my dad's dream, to have a pond. So I went from country into town, back out into the country during my time of my early teen years. And, you know, there was, living in town, I had a lot of people around, but I guess mine was, we didn't see a lot of other kids. Even though I was in a subdivision, there were limited, I think there was 4 kids in the whole subdivision other than us. And most of them were younger than us. So we didn't have kids to hang around with there.
Well, that was one of the things that I guess my dad, he wanted us to not be influenced by a lot of different kids. I mean, even though we went to school, and was around lots of kids every day. When we come home, he wanted us to be able to do chores and stuff like that, rather than having to listen to us whine and complain, I guess. And
about wanting to go somewhere or
play. Go play with this person, go play with that person. Because where we moved at on the east side, there was nobody. We were just by ourselves, you know. And at that time, I was turning 15 years old, and I well remember asking my dad. I said, Dad, you know, I'm going to be 15 years old. It's going to be time for me to get my driver's license. And he said, well, son, I don't have a problem with that. He said, I don't know what you're going to drive, because you're not driving my vehicle. And, boy, that just, like, knocked my feet out from under me, you know.
Because everybody was looking forward to that 15, and Mom and Dad's letting you drive the car.
Exactly, but my dad said no, you know. But anyway, he told me, he said, now, I'll tell you what, there's no... my dad, you know, was like I said, he was a logger, and he had an old Datsun pickup that I think had 150,000 miles on it, I guess. And he'd set it back behind the house back there, and he told me, he said, now there's an old Datsun pickup back there. He said, if you want to work on that thing and get it running, he said, then you get your driver's license, you have yourself a way to go. And so I looked at that old truck every day I come home from school. I went out there and tinkered around on it. Didn't know a thing in the world about, I knew about small engines, but I'd never worked on automobile engines. So I began to tinker around with this thing and try to figure out stuff and what I knew. And before I knew it, the summer was coming upon me, and I needed money. So I asked my dad, I said, Dad, would it be possible that I could have 1 acre of land on the other side of the property to grow cucumbers on for the market, because I need a job this summer? And he said, well, he said, son, if you want to do that, that's fine with me. And my dad had a tractor. So I took the tractor and immediately went over and started preparing the ground, and then he helped me get a little fertilized. He told me, said, you're going to have to pay me back. I went to the factory. I signed a contract with Brown and Miller. Was it Brown and Miller? Or I can't remember if it was Brown and Miller or whichever one it was here in the town. And they gave me a can of seeds, and I signed a contract that I would plant 1 acre. And I went back and prepared that land and planted it, and for a whole summer, every morning, I got up and picked an acre of cucumbers right by myself. Now, I could never pick the full acre by myself every day. So what I would do is I would mark the field off into 3 different sections, and I would pick that one section the first part of the day, and Mom would take me to town, and I'd sell my pickles. And I'd come back the next day, and I'd pick the next section I had marked off, and I just rotated it to where I was always 3 days out on my cucumbers. And I had a job all summer long, and I made enough money. I paid my dad back. I made enough money to get the old Datsun pickup going. I painted it midnight blue with a white top, And that's what I drove. That old thing, I mean, you have to understand, it probably had over 150,000 miles on it when I rebuilt it. But look, at 15 years old,
you're proud.
I was proud to have that old truck.
And see, mine was just a little bit different. My dad taught me how to drive between 14 and 15. He and Mom both allowed me to drive wherever we went, just so I would get the experience. And I remember my first time going downtown, Dad took me, and it was on a Sunday afternoon when he knew most traffic wasn't any traffic around. Taught me how to drive, to stop at stop signs and red lights and what to look for. And then when I turned 15, he went and bought me my first car. He paid $300 for a Barracuda, like a 64 or something, Barracuda, 68 or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It was in the 60s.
It was in the 60s. It was a black-looking color on the bottom and white on top, and I mean wore out to the hilt. It was wore out. But he told me I could paint it any color I wanted, and he was hoping for black and white or the original colors or red or something pretty. I chose powder blue. I couldn't get away with anything in the town because when you saw a powder blue Barracuda coming down the street, you knew who it was. And all my friends laughed because they didn't want to ride in it. But bless their hearts, they all rode in it because I was the only one with a car at the time. Yeah. All my friends did not get a car till they were nearly 16 years old. So they would ride in my powder blue Barracuda just because.
Yeah, you got to realize the reason this was such turbulent times for our teenage years, you have to realize I went to school probably half of my life. There was no, it was all white.
No racial issues.
There was no racial. We didn't have black. They had black schools and they had white schools. Mm-hmm. And
the public schools did have black and white.
Yeah.
And I went to a public school.
She did go to one. See, my school didn't. We had 2 black guys in my whole school, and their family put them there on purpose. They were real good people, and the thing that was so hard for so many people was that it wasn't hard for us because me as a child growing up, when I told y'all about those 17 kids being in the yard out there that day, some of those were black kids. They were black kids. We all played together. We didn't see. And
they're still our friends today. I mean, we still see some of those people.
They're still our friends today. We didn't see color.
No.
I mean,
that was brought into.
The government did that to us.
Yeah.
When they sent me to it, they sent me to a black school. They didn't want me there. I didn't want to be there because I felt out of place, but the government integrated us all. I didn't know these people. They didn't know me. Of course, it was that way with a lot of them. But then, all of a sudden, kids began to revolt. They began to have, the schools, we had riots. We had all these kind of things. And I couldn't figure out in my mind what was going on because a lot of my friends were black. And I was like, why is everybody fighting? What's the problem? We're just people, and
so we both grew up in that era where they started integrating the schools.
Yeah.
And I guess it was just simply, even if you took race out of the picture.
Right.
And you had 2 groups of people living here, and you said, okay, we're going to take part of these people and part of these people, and we're going to mix them in the middle and make them all live together. They're going to get angry with each other.
Yeah.
As long as they're living separately, they didn't pay any attention. When you make them live something they're not used to, it caused issues. I didn't have that many problems where I went to school, but I was young enough, I don't remember the fighting and any of that. And we all, like I said, we were already, there was no racial issues there to start with.
No, we were all raised together.
Yeah.
And that's...
I went to school with all I went to school with all colors, so it didn't matter to us. We were used to it. But a country school like this...
Yeah, like I went to in the country wasn't that way, even though we all played together. But when they put us in school, it just did something. I don't know what it was. It didn't affect the kids that I knew at that time. I mean, we all played together. We still play together. It wasn't no big deal. I still see my friends to this day. We're all still very close friends. I've never been one who's seen color.
No.
You know, I mean, because we didn't grow up that way. My daddy would have whipped me if I'd have used any kind of language like that. You know, and he told me, he said, son, we're all God's children. We all belong to God. And we just didn't see that.
But that was an issue in the South at that time, and there was a lot of problems. And the school system, I guess, if you look at it that way, we just kind of learned how to just blend and get along.
We learned to adapt.
And so the early school years was more traumatic than the later.
The later, it was more of a problem than the later ones were. But you know, what we thought was bad in our life was actually pretty good, because it taught us how to get along with other people. It taught us how to it taught us a lot of good social skills
to accept
everybody. And you know, and that's if I take anything away from that, that's what one good thing I take is, like homesteading today. We probably have people of all different races watch us here on our channel, and Wanda and I are not one that sees color or nationality or anything like this. We literally love everybody.
And I mean, I love the fact that I can communicate with people from different countries.
Yes.
People from different nationalities.
I love it.
Whatever, races.
Yeah.
Because I don't even, when I talk to people, especially if I'm communicating emails, I have no idea what you look like.
Yeah.
I have no clue. And I've been very fooled with a lot of people, and it's not because of black and white. Sometimes it's because man and woman.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm talking to somebody, and I think I'm talking to a woman.
Yeah, I remember that's happened to us
all
several.
Of a sudden, it's a man.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, I thought I was, you know.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's no, that came from our childhood.
That came from our childhood, learning how to deal with that. And
at our school, it was more high class versus low class. That was an issue in my school, because I was in a public school, but we had these clubs that the kids that had more money than I had were in clubs, and it was kind of like when you're in college. You had to be asked to be in these clubs, and it was exclusive. And I was not one that was in the club, so, and quite a few of my friends weren't in the clubs, but there were some that did make it into the club. And it was more of a issue then of, were you good enough, this is the way we looked at it sometimes, to be in the club. And looking back, I'm really glad I wasn't in that, because it might have made me think more of myself than I should have.
Yeah.
It might have given me a superiority complex, because sometimes it does that.
It will do that to you.
But that was where our school was, and I learned at a young age not to judge people on whether they had money or didn't have money, but not to judge them on their looks, because some people may look one way and they're very wealthy even though they look poor. They just didn't care and dress the way they wanted to dress. So you learn not to judge people.
And two, you know, me being a guy, let me just go ahead and say this. Once I reached a certain age, I realized they was an opposite sex. You know, and that part played a real big part in my life, you know. And you got to realize, up until that point, my daddy was one of them kind of, you wore a military-style haircut. I mean, my hair was cut flat on the side. I wore a flat top, what they call an old-timey flat top. And all the guys in school, I looked around, they were growing, their hair was growing long, and all the girls were going for the guys with the long hair and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was driving around in an old beat-up Datsun pickup truck, and all these guys had the nice Camaros and different things, and I was just, man, I felt so out of place. And I told my dad one day, I went home, I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm gonna let my hair grow long. I was expecting to just get waylaid, you know, but he looked at me and he said, well, son, is that something you want to do? I told him, I said, yes, sir. I said, I'm gonna let my hair grow long. And he said, well, if that's what you want to do, you know. He never said a word to me. I let it grow out. It grew down on my shoulders. The only problem with that, I got in with some some of the wrong people, and I let my hormones drive my life for a while. And when I did, I kind of put on the back burner all the good teaching I had and stuff like that, and I ended up buying me a car. I ended up building a race car out of it. It was a street rod, if you want to call it that. It had flames. I become a painter, and I painted flames across the hood. They came all down the sides of the car, and I become very versatile in building engines and stuff like that in automobiles. So there was like 3 of us, maybe 4 of us in the whole school that had hot rods, and I was one of them. And when you pulled up to school that morning, boy, everybody come to your car, and they sit around. It's kind of like you've seen in the 50s movies. This kind of stuff actually happened,
But only in the 70s.
But only in the 70s, yeah. And I was one of the guys at that time. I mean, I was the cool guy. I had the car. There was, like I said, there was about 4 or 5 of us in the whole school that had them. And on the weekends, the law would come to us and they would tell us, all right, boys, let's take them out here on a certain strip of the road. We'd go out there on this straightaway in this highway. They'd shut the road off, and we'd race up and down there for maybe an hour or so, and then the law would stop us and they'd say, okay, if I catch you any more tonight, you're going to jail. And that taught us, that taught us to have some respect for the local law, because at that point the local law wasn't out to just destroy you. They knew we was going to do it, whether they were there or not. So they figured in their mind,
they monitored it.
If they monitor it, then they won't have any more problems out of us. And there was years went by. The law had no problem out of any of us. I mean, because we knew that we was going to get to do this. We went and done it. We come back. We behaved ourselves.
Yeah.
So we learned to respect the local law at that time. And
well, mine was, I guess, where you were talking about the hair. Mine was with my mom and dad. I wore dresses throughout most of my growing up period. We were Baptist, and I had to wear dresses all the time. And I remember a friend across the road from me gave me a pair of pants. Granted, I was a size 3 or 5, and she was a size 13. And I thought that was the best thing in the world to get that pair of pants.
Yeah.
And I took them to my mom, and my mom's a seamstress. She could sew anything. I got this pair of pants from Pam, and I said, "Is there any way you can make it where they will fit me?" And she looked at them and she said, "Well, I think so." But y'all, these were bell bottoms. Y'all remember?
Oh yeah, the bell bottom age. Yeah.
Okay, a size 13 bell bottom.
Yep.
Okay, what Mom had to do was cut the sides of the pants down, but she left the bottoms on. So I had pants this wide with legs this wide, 2 of them. That was the best wearing pair of pants I've ever had in my life, and my mom wouldn't let me wear them to school. She would let me wear them when I got home.
Yeah.
Just so I could say I wore pants. But the last day of school that year, she allowed me to wear pants to school. I was so tickled, y'all. I was just ecstatic. And that summer I worked and bought my own blue jeans. And the next year she would allow me to wear blue jeans a couple of days a week because I only had 2 pair. And the rest of the time I had to wear my skirts.
Yeah.
So you go through these changes. And I also got my hair cut about that time. I had long hair.
Long hair.
And I didn't get it cut short, but I did get the bangs cut. Back then, the wings on the side was in.
Yeah.
And I managed to get the wings for the high school years.
But see, guys, I know this may not sound like this has much to do with financial freedom, but it has everything to do with financial freedom, because what Wanda and I have just explained to y'all in some of our early teenage years is how we were molded. And the molding of a young person has everything to do with how they will turn out in their life. Now,
our parents didn't just put us in one mold and say,
right.
As you can see, both of us, our parents were very lenient.
Yeah.
They didn't say, no, I said you've got to wear a dress 24 hours a day, or no, you can't cut your hair, or no, you have to cut your hair every
right.
week. They allowed us to make our own decisions, We both ended up with vehicles. We were allowed to go places by ourselves.
By ourselves, we did. Yeah.
They trusted us not to get into trouble. That's where our parents trusted us to be an adult. Even though we weren't, they were allowing us to make decisions.
They expected us to be responsible.
Yes.
Is what they expected. Now, had we broken that trust, then our privileges would have been taken from us. Yeah, we were allowed to make our own decisions. We were allowed to figure out what we wanted to be in life. Our parents did not tell us, you're going to grow up to be this, or I want you to grow up to be this, or I want you to grow up to be that. You're going to college, young man.
No.
We didn't hear none of that.
Now, if we wanted to go, that was up to us.
Yeah, that was up to us.
And they would have supported us.
Yeah.
But we weren't told what we had to do.
No, we were never told what we had to be in life.
And just like Danny had his first job was the cucumbers, mine was I babysat for about 6 or 8 months, and then I was a tutor for one summer, and I tutored younger kids, and that gave me experience working with younger kids. And then the second summer, I was working at the library. I love to read, and I had worked at the library at school for a couple of years in the school library, so I went and applied at our local library and worked all summer there. And I used that money to buy my clothes.
Yeah.
And Dad bought my car, but I had to take and pay for gas and stuff like that.
Yeah, we had to pay our own gas and insurance and stuff.
We weren't just given a car and said, here, I'm paying for everything. And so that was like, you had to have some gas money. If I wanted to go out and eat anywhere other than when Dad took us out, I had to pay for it.
You had to pay for it. We just taught you responsibility.
Clothes was something we paid for.
We bought our own clothes,
Mom still bought some, but if I wanted something special, like the blue jeans, I'd go buy it.
Well, we would get clothes for Christmas.
Yeah, and if I wanted a new pair of shoes, actually, my first paycheck, I went and bought a pair of shoes. My mom laughed. She said, I can't believe you made, I think I made $40, and I spent 30 of it on a pair of shoes. Yeah. That was my first paycheck. I can remember that.
Well, I remember those days, yeah.
You know.
But y'all, this is what we're, I guess, like I mentioned before, this is what we're trying to show you is with young people. And I know society today is more rigid than it was when we were growing up.
And it's changed.
Guys, things has changed so much since we were younger. And I know a lot of the things that we went through,
Kids can't do it now.
The kids can't do it now, and I understand that. But some of the things that we tell y'all, some of those things can still be implemented.
Maybe in a different way.
Just in a different, like you're right, in a different manner.
Kids still need chores. They still need a job at a young age, even if it's something you gave them to do. They still need to
learn. They need to mow in a yard, whatever. I mean, they need a job.
They need to learn to finish the job. I guess that's my biggest thing is teach your kids to, if you give them a chore, don't accept the whining and the crying and the complaining.
No, not.
Make them finish the chore.
Do not reward them until the chore is complete.
Yeah, I think that would be my biggest thing because our parents did that. They made us finish the chores.
Yeah, and see, that'll go a long way with financial freedom because when you start to set out to be financially free, that means buckling down. That means when you set goals, you got to learn to set short-term goals and long-term goals, which we'll talk about that later in the video series. But you have to learn how, once you set a goal, to be able to finish that goal. Spend your money foolishly. People go, oh, well, I only drink a Coca-Cola a day. Well, Wanda and I at the store the other day, she bought a Coca-Cola, or it was a Sprite. $1.79 for this Sprite. And she goes, oh my God, I'm not paying that for that. I said, well, we've paid it all along. And she goes, what?
I've not been paying for it.
I'm the one who's been paying for it. She hadn't. She goes, oh my God, Danny, we can't do this anymore,
I wasn't paying any attention to the price, and I didn't realize for a year or two they've been $1.79. Yeah. I was thinking 99 cents. I reached to grab a Coke.
Stop and think about that. People who drink a lot of them. Now we don't. We might drink 2 a month.
Maybe
2 a month if we're lucky because we've disciplined ourselves to that. But people who drink Coca-Colas and Sprites and 7-Ups or whatever all day, every day, or smoke a pack of cigarettes or a pack of tobacco, Copenhagen, whatever, Skoal, whatever you want to call it, you stop and think about in a year's time, add up how much you do a day and how much you do a year.
You will be shocked.
You will be shocked.
Yes.
So these are just some things we learned in life. You know, all my buddies dipped and done stuff like that. I didn't. I never did.
I didn't do any of those.
We never
things.
dipped. We never smoked. Can't say I didn't drink, but we did not a lot.
I didn't do any of those things. I didn't have a bad habit like that. Mine.
I never had a bad habit of anything like that.
I tried to stay away from that, and I guess that's one thing that got me through my teenage years was staying out of the drugs, alcohol, smoking, partying. I didn't hang with that crowd. So that helped me get through my teenage years with that type of discipline. I thought more of myself than to allow myself to get into a position that would ruin my reputation. Even though I wasn't a popular girl, my morals was higher than that.
We were raised with good morals. And anyway, guys, we're going to probably have another series on teenagers because we didn't get it all covered this time.
We didn't even break the surface.
We didn't even break the surface, really. But we're going to end the video here and say thank y'all for watching, and hopefully you'll see something on this. If you don't do that, just bring back some memories. You know, those of you that's older, like us, help you to reminisce a little bit about your younger days. And,
and that's what's fun about it is the reminiscence.
It is a little bit of reminiscence, and it does bring back good memories. So we're going to cut the video off here today and say thank y'all for watching, and thank you from Deep South Homestead.